Hi everyone, welcome back. And in this video, I'll be giving you some information on identifying user roles for an application before writing user stories. So now this is usually done before any project starts. And since we are dealing with, a lot of agile practices, and I've taken a couple of videos on how to write user stories, I thought that this video would be useful in order to write good user stories. So to write your good user stories or to even start off your application, you need to identify user roles. So with these user roles, let us see how we'll be able to first identify user roles and then how will we be able to use it in our user stories. So let's get into it. So why is user role identification important? So user role identification is important to define the access and privileges a user will have when interacting with the application. Okay, so now you're building this product or an application, and unless you define user roles, only then you'll be able to understand the type of users you are dealing with, and also you would be able to provide relevant access and privileges for those particular user roles when the time they interact with your product or application. Okay, so apart from this is you would be able to use these user roles in order to define your user stories. So user roles give more meaning to your user stories and also to the context in which you are trying to explain to users a particular functionality. It's always good, rather than just saying generally for a user of the application, you can define what type of a user role is going to interact with the application in a particular scenario. So when to identify these user roles? So user roles are identified and defined at the very beginning phase of the product development. So before you can even start off with developing a product, you first need to understand who are the users who would be interacting with your product. And when you identify these users, only then you get to understand what are their different pain points and what are the different problems they are facing, and how you would try to provide a solution for them. So always it happens at the very beginning, at the inception phase of your product. And how to identify these user roles now? So it's always done, not I can't say always, but most of the time it's done by conducting a brainstorming session with product stakeholders. You have clients and the product development team also. So now the note over here is that not everyone from the client team or your product development team and also the stakeholder teams need to be present for this brainstorming session. So you can choose who are the right representatives and who would be the right representative, and you can add those members in your brainstorming session where you would be brainstorming for new user roles. So with this in mind, let's see how does this process happen. So during the brainstorming session, there's a lot of steps that you go with in order to finalize your user roles. So the very first stage is the brainstorm session. So once the users finish brainstorming, they identify, the different user roles. And once user roles are identified, you start then categorizing user roles and then you generalize them. I'll give you an example for this. So consider, like, let's take this particular application. So consider the team is building an end-to-end product order management system and delivery product. Okay, so there's an integration of order management as well as delivery management all in one particular product. So now the team comes together, and the first step is to brainstorm. So all the team members can brainstorm and come up with possible users who will be using the product. So this brainstorming session is not that everyone needs to come up with a user role, but with this everyone brainstorms, and each one, when they come up with an idea, they define what type of user role might be relevant for the product. So this brainstorming session can go around for like over 15 or 10 15 or 20 minutes and so on, depending on how your brainstorming session is going. Okay, so now when you have done your brainstorming, so parallelly what happens is the users identify user roles. Okay, so let's say there are different users in the room, and then each user is now they come up with some different interactions. So the users, some they just take sticky notes and then they write down what could be the possible interaction, what could be the possible user role. So let's say you have this user over here, they just write it down on a sticky saying that gets orders. So someone who gets orders. So once they put that up on the sticky. They just call it out saying that a person would now get orders, and then they place it down. Similarly, you have users who would come up saying that there's this user who owns the store, there's this user who oversees all activities, places orders, online shoppers, there's this user who's a physical store shopper. And then you have the user who manages the warehouse, you have delivery agents, pickers, packers, shippers. Then you have there's this user who tracks orders, and then the user creates promotions. So you have couple of ideas coming up in the room, and then people are constantly brainstorming. They come up with some user role, then something hits their mind, they write it down on a sticky, and then they call it out to the room, so the entire room, the members are aware of the different user roles. Okay, so once this happens, so now once everyone has almost some user roles put up in mind and they paste it on the board, this next step is to categorize. Okay, to categorize these user roles. So how do you categorize these user roles is by trying to see which user role is kind of similar to each other. Okay, so you check out the different user roles. Over here in this example, you see that a person who gets orders and a person who creates promotions are kind of similar to each other. So you then place these two as one category. The next one is you have a user who oversees all activities, and you have another user who owns the store. So it's kind of an oversee and a management kind of a user. So you categorize them. Then you have two standalone user roles that do not are not related to any other user roles on the sticky, so you just keep them aside, which is manage the warehouse and delivers orders. The next one is, if you see over here, there are four stickies that are kind of categorized to each other. So you have an online shopper, a physical store shopper, person who places orders and tracks orders. So this falls under one category. And the third one is, you see that the picker, packer, and shipper, they come under one category. So once you have completed categorizing all your user roles that you have identified during the brainstorming session, the fourth stage is to generalize these user roles. So now if you see the generalized form of getting orders and create promotions, who can do that? A sales rep probably. So you generalize these two, user roles to a sales rep role. Okay. Now, we don't want to be really specific in the system saying that this user is a user who gets orders, this user is a user who creates orders. We do not want to be so specific. We need to, kind of generalize user roles where you'll be able to create generalized accesses and privileges for that particular role. So it's always good to, kind of generalize, and that's what we're doing over here. So similarly, if you see a person who oversees all activities and owns the store, it can be generalized to a store owner. And since these are standalones, you just have the warehouse manager and then you have the delivery agent. So over here, it doesn't matter whether the customer is going to, whether the person is going to be an online shopper, or the person is going to shop from a physical store, or the person is placing an order or tracks order. It doesn't matter what could be the type or what could be the action, but ultimately when you roll it up and see, you find that the user role is actually a customer who either is going to shop online or come to a physical store, and the customer is going to place orders and track their orders. So ultimately it's the customer. And similarly over here, you see the picker, packer, and shipper, they all roll up to be a warehouse member. Okay, so these are the ways in which you can generalize your user roles. And once you have these generalized user roles, you can check it out and you can finalize, okay, these are the user roles that probably are going to be in interacting with my product. Okay, so now you have the list of user roles, and now when you have defined and really finalized the user roles, so when you write user stories, so if you see, without an actual user role, your user story would be like, as a user, I should be able to add new promotions so that my product sales will increase. So now who is the actual user who's going to create promotions? It's very much generalized. Okay, it's a user, but which type of a user is going to create these promotions? So you really need to give more context to your user story, so that other people who read your user stories, they kind of understand who is the person for which they are developing that particular solution or the feature. So when you add this specific user role in a user story, it would look like, as a sales rep, I should be able to add new promotions so that my product sales will increase. So now developers and other stakeholders would know that they are providing a solution for a sales representative. And always try to keep your user roles much more at an individual level, because for example, let's say a company purchases this product, I can say that the company would be able to perform this particular activity, but it's not actually the company who's performing an activity. Okay, it's the users of that company who is performing an action. So be more specific with your user roles and don't just create something general like a company, okay, or an organization. So be more specific as to which role you are dealing with. And this would actually even give you more clarity to the users who are interacting with your system. You would be able to identify their journeys, their pain points, and the different opportunities. So you would be able to do a lot with it. So I've taken a video on identifying, user journeys. It all comes out from identifying these user roles. Okay. So I hope that you got some understanding on how to identify user roles and why do you identify these user roles and how do you do that. So if you found this helpful, please do give this a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed to this channel, please do subscribe to this channel and also do share your feedbacks. Thank you.